makers are stupid, or they think we're stupid, or maybe both, but they're wrong. The American people are at a point where they see through it. And so, and it got worse this last week, and Johnny Yellen says it's not a bailout. And I just explained that it was the biggest bailout in history by far. But the American people see that. You don't need a PhD in economics is probably a handicap at this point, but you don't need that kind of training to see what just happened. And so people don't trust the government. I mean, it's not just my opinion. It shows up in polls like Rasmussen and other polls. That's very clear. So does the Fed try to pull a rabbit out of a hat? And everyone says, no, it's not really a rabbit. And you had it up your sleeve. And I see through your magician act, and it's phony. We may be at the point where we're beyond the capacity of the Fed or any central bank to do anything. And then you say, well, what next? Well, the answer is an extreme and coarse form of socialism, where you're like Argentina, where you actually are nationalizing everything. We're pretty far gone, and then there's the question, what physicists call phase transition. Do you go from water to steam? Does the water actually start to boil and then the pot's empty? Are we at that point where it's too late to do it in reverse? We maybe have to make allowance for that. We may not, although we're dangerously close. So what's the difference? Where, what could in effect save the country or overcome some of these issues that you're raising? And it always comes down to leadership. And right now, it's Republican and Democrat. I'm not picking sides with this. The leadership is unbelievably weak. Let's start at the micro level. Why was the UK risk manager of Silicon Valley Bank spending all her time promoting Pride Month and LGBTQ, I don't even know, plus whatever, awareness? Like, I'm not saying nobody should talk about that. I'm saying you're the risk manager of Silicon Valley Bank. Why weren't you looking at your maturity mismatch? Why weren't you looking at the volatility of the bonds? Why weren't you basically diversifying your portfolio? Why weren't you locking in your deposits for longer periods of time? Why weren't you hedging with futures and options? You're putting out the pride flag. And again, do your thing with the flag, but don't tell me you're a risk manager of a bank. All the way up to the White House. And, I'm not going out on a limb, but Biden is severely cognitively impaired. He did a little press conference. Not actually, it wasn't a press conference because he didn't take questions. He made a statement on Silicon Valley Bank the other morning, and then he just walked off. If you want to see something scary and you see Biden on TV, hit the mute button. What the Germans call MOS, without sound. You just hit the mute button, and it's 10 times scarier than anything he said. I mean, he's frail. He's shuffling. He's had 2 aneurysms. He's severely impaired, but he couldn't get out of the room. The reporters are shouting questions. He couldn't get out of the room because he couldn't work the doorknob. If I'm saying that, and I do say it, that I have an intelligence community background. Don't think that Chinese and Russian and Iranian and Turkish and Israeli intelligence services hadn't reached the same conclusion a long time ago. And what you do when you have people like that, you test them. So I look at how the U.S. got the budget. The debt to GDP ratio under control after World War II. World War II, at the end of World War II, was the second highest in U.S. history. The highest is today at 130%. At that time, it was about 120%. But, at least we won the war. We were a global hegemon. But between 1945 and 1980, the debt to GDP ratio declined from 120% to 30%. 30% is fine. It's like going $5 on your credit card. You're like, yeah, no problem. Everyone would agree 30% is a very comfortable level. Angela Merkel and the Europeans said 60% is our ceiling. Carmen Reinhart and Ken Rogoff, who have done some brilliant work on this, said, yeah, and 90% debt to GDP, that's where you go through the looking glass. That's, at a lower level, you borrow $1, you spend $1, and you get more than $1 of GDP. When you go over 90, you borrow $1, you spend $1, and you get less than $1 of GDP, which means if you look at the numerator and the denominator, your numerator is going up by $1, but your denominator is going up by less than $1. What does that do to the ratio? The ratio goes up. So you're trying to borrow your way out of a debt trap, and you can't get there, and we're at 130%. Here's what America does. We blow up the debt to win a war, and then we bring it back down again in times of peace. And it's like dry powder, and if we have to get into another war, we can blow it up again. And this, I trace this, my book, this is also in Road to Ruin. I took it back to George Washington and Alexander Hamilton. But so when did the debt blow up. Civil War, Mexican-American War, Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, exactly when you would expect. And when did it come down? 1870s, no wars. 1950s, no wars. It was a Cold War, but not a shooting war. We've done this over and over through Republicans and Democrats. So, and where's James Baker? He was the convening power on the Plaza Accord and the Louvre Accord. This is like adult stuff where serious people get together with a serious problem and they fix it. James Baker's still around, but he's 87, 88. Let the man enjoy retirement. But I don't see people of that caliber, the George Shultzes and others on the scene today. Janet Yellen knows nothing. I mean, she's got a high IQ, but she's a labor economist, statistics geek. She doesn't know anything about what we're talking about. She was, the day before Silicon Valley Bank, she was giving a speech on climate change. And she went to Ukraine and said, whatever it takes. How about California? How about the United States? So she's clueless. Again, I hate cliches, but it works. But I don't see that caliber of leadership. So if you say, what could fix it? Some really, really strong leadership. But you can be a Republican or a Democrat, but I'm talking about seriousness of purpose, not just high IQ points, but practical approaches, good rapport. That's what we need. Because I'm getting a lot of inquiries like, hey, I'm getting my money out of the banks, or I don't trust the banks, or the U.S. Treasury, they're playing games. What can I do? And I said, well, in terms of the system, there's nothing you can do. This is a lesson that was taught to me. I was a 27-year-old starting out banker at Citibank back in the day. But Walter Wriston was the chairman, and Walter Wriston was the CEO. He was the second greatest banker of the 20th century. So number one, I'd give to Pierpont Morgan, but I would give Wriston number two. But he was very open, and I was a senior officer. I get to hang out, and I had a conversation with him once. I just seen this movie Rollover with great Jane Fonda, Chris Christopherson, Hume Corona in 1980. But it was about what we're talking about. It was like a Silicon Valley Bank situation that spun out of control and the financial system collapsed and all that. But it started with the Arabs taking their deposits out and buying gold. And that was kind of happening. And it's what was going on with Silicon Valley Bank. So I said, I said, Mr. Wriston, I said, what's to stop the Arabs from taking all their money out of Citibank and buying gold? And he said, nothing. He said, but somebody sold them the gold and they got the money and they put it back in the bank. And it could be a different bank, but they lend it to us in the Eurodollar market. In other words, it's a closed circuit. The money doesn't go anywhere. And that was like, that kind of hit me right between the eyes. It's like, actually, you're right. An individual can get the gold, but you're paying somebody else the money. They're putting it back in the bank. And at the end of the day, the money never escapes the system. It is a closed circuit. So the key ingredient is the interbank market, banks lending to each other, except now we have the Fed lending to all the banks. But that doesn't stop an individual from taking her money out and buying gold. And, I'd never do anything 100%. I've always recommended a 10% allocation, season to taste. If you want 5%, fine. If you want 20, it's on you. But I think 10% is the right amount. And it's not bank money, and physical. Take physical custody, put it in a safe place. Like private vault. Don't put it in the banks because that's the first place the government will go. It's all legal, by the way, but it's your money. But it's not digital, and so you can't freeze it, you can't hack it, you can't